Today is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I was flipping through this sermon. This is long. You guys are... I'm kidding. It's not long. It's not. I promise. But what I will say is earlier this week, no one else had signed up to preach today. So let's be real clear. It was me or no. Well, actually, it probably would have been Maeve. That would have been nice. That would have been nice. Oh well. So I guess I'm trying to just relieve myself a little bit that it was me or nothing. So here you go. Everyone may have heard the analogy that religions were all trying to get to the top of a mountain, right? And that every tradition has a different path. And this resonates with me, and it calls out that there are other traditions, and they may not be as accessible for us because this is our tradition, but there are other tools that may work along the way. So, for me, as I mentioned, in my own bio, other religions have always fascinated me, but still, everything does come down to what Jesus has said, which is really love the Lord and love your neighbor, right? And a slight reframing of that is pay attention and be kind, right? So I have said in the past, and it's funny because I feel bad for Cynthia. Cynthia is new with us today. She has not heard me in the past. Everybody else probably had the opportunity to not come today because they've already heard some of this. And Lynn, I'm thinking back to one of my early first sermons about Groundhog Day, which is one of my favorite movies. And Paul said afterwards, "That was a good Buddhist sermon." And I miss Paul. But what I will say is that Christians are really the best when it comes down to what to do, right? And that kind of fits in very nicely with how to be kind. But I will say the Buddhists really do a very good job of how to be and how to love God. And I'm glad that Maeve called out that there is a tradition in the Christian tradition of meditation, etc. But Jesus was pointing that out, and fewer in the church afterwards pointed out quite as much. So you're in luck because for the sake of time and your patience, I'm really only going to focus on paying attention rather than paying attention and being kind. So I will admit to everyone that I struggle with the teachings of the church and interpretations of Christianity that are beyond the teachings of Jesus, meaning that I'm always willing to listen, but if it's someone other than Jesus who says that it's so, I end up asking a few other questions, right? And so some of the most obvious examples for all of us is preachers that you hear on church, hear on TV, for example, explaining what God thinks, etc. Obvious answers, right? I'm not necessarily going to take that at face value. But there are others, who are extremely smart individuals, like St. Augustine, who, from my perspective, comes off a little bit like an attorney for God. And I am confident that God does not need an attorney. And if you start sounding like one, well, maybe there's something that you're missing there from that perspective. So part of this resistance in my life, or rather, part of this resistance comes with the idea of things that we're supposed to expect in the afterlife, and what we should be doing to prepare for that. So I love a handful of stories from the Buddhist tradition, which is the Buddha is asked by a monk in his order. And the monk is angry. He's like, "Listen, give me these answers right now, or I'm out of here." He wants to know, is the cosmos finite or infinite in space? Is the universe finite and infinite in space? Is the soul the same or different as the body? And what happens to the enlightened person after death? Yeah, want to know. Give it up right now. And the Buddha then tells the story about a man being shot by a poison arrow, right? And the family rushes him to the doctor, but the man won't let the surgeon remove the arrow. Let him remove the poison arrow, because first he needs to know, so wait, was the shooter tall or short or medium height? And what color was the skin? And what kind of bow was used? What was the material made of the arrow made of? What type of feathers were on it? And the point of this from the Buddhist perspective is like, look, focus on the immediate problem, right? The human condition is real. It's immediate. It is defined by suffering in a lot of ways, right? And the primary goal of that spiritual practice isn't to solve theoretical decisions or questions about the universe. It's to pull out the arrow, right? To free ourselves from suffering, from ignorance, from greed and hatred. And the other part is the intellectual distraction, which is metaphysical speculation. Feels good. You feel smart. You feel like you're putting in the work and that you're doing important work by wanting those answers before taking action to heal or to sit in stillness to prevent us from actually transforming. So I've mentioned this as well because the more I think about it, this ended up being a spiritual moment for me. And I mentioned this story where I was on a trip in Toronto, and it was a gorgeous day, and I'm walking through the square, and there's a street preacher, which the microphone, and kind of yelling at everybody, but he has a pamphlet that says, "Is this all there is?" And I stopped and I said, it's actually a pretty nice day, right? But this is the point. If you're constantly distracted, you're not actually paying attention to what we have. So I am very thankful that I know that everybody here has had at least one experience with meditation because it happened earlier this morning. So, but I have talked about meditation, and I've said, okay, I'm actually going to walk you through just a very short one, and I'm going to set things up a little bit because everything that we do in our lives is to change our consciousness. That's it, right? We have our consciousness. We are identical to our consciousness, meaning that everything we do is about that. So you can think about that a bit, but what it comes down to, if consciousness is really all that we have, it's important to understand what it actually is and what it's not. So, spoiler alert, most of the time, our consciousness is completely overwhelmed by the internal monologue or whatever it is that we're telling ourselves. Always, always, always. And we believe it to be true. So, I do apologize for this because, quite frankly, while everyone's experienced meditators right now, after this morning, this is going to be a little bit more of a talking and directed meditation than you would have in a traditional meditation. And I fully acknowledge that this isn't necessarily a good starting point, but I'm really hoping that one of two things doesn't happen. One, it's so frustrating that you're like, I'm never doing that again. Or two, you kind of see it and you say, all right, sure, but so what? So again, I want you to consider now that if you, like most people, probably internalize your mind firmly in your head, right? And that you use your mind or use consciousness to understand the world, right? You and your consciousness and the world, very different things. And I'm just going to suggest a few pointers in the meditation, which I hope has a slight shift in that perspective. So I'm going to call that out in advance. I'm hoping you're going to notice is that sense of you that you have, that sense that you know that this is me, this is I, that you feel so strongly. I'm going to call out that sense sits inside of consciousness. Consciousness is not inside of you as much as you are inside of it. The real goal for this meditation, any meditation, is to simply be aware. I'll say, love God. Be aware of what is, right? The goal is to stop being distracted, to stop the immediate identification with your thoughts, right? So it's not to stop your thoughts, but it's to see how everything, including your thoughts and the feelings, how they arise on their own, almost like a waterfall, and that the thoughts are the most difficult part. because they're always auditioning for your attention, right? Inevitably, one of these thoughts wins, and it captures your attention. In the meditation, when that happens, and you look up and you've been distracted, don't worry about it, but take a look. Where are you in relation to that thought that came up? Okay. So, we'll start the meditation. I'm going to suggest that you gently close your eyes. You don't have to. If you don't close your eyes, any instruction that I have is just the same thing as your visual field, right? So, take a couple of deep breaths. I'm going to call out, this is not meant to be a dreamy state. You are fully aware and paying attention. But begin to follow your breath. The deep inhale and the exhale, and just notice that for a minute. And now notice your visual field, whether your eyes are open or closed. If they're closed, notice that it's dark, but not fully dark, right? There's shapes and shadows there. So keep your visual field active, as it were. If your eyes are open, just look at the whole expanse of what you see in front of you. Have a very wide view of everything. And now start to notice everything else that arises. Sound of my voice, the feeling of your feet, the feeling of your seat in the chair, now I'm just going to direct you to feel the sensation that is the front of your face. The tinglings or tightness, the front of your face. Now feel the sensation of your back. The feeling of your back. Now feel the back of your head, the feeling of the back of your head. And even go back and forth a little bit between the feeling of your face and the feeling of the back of your head. So are you behind the front of your face? Or rather, are you in front of the back of your head and behind the front of your face? Now you can gently open your eyes a moment so that everybody has their eyes open, but keep your visual field very active, have very as wide as you can. Keep your peripheral vision in play. And look at everything as if it's a single pane of glass, almost like you're looking at a movie screen, but instead of the movie, you're looking at the screen itself. And while you're doing that, there's a pointer of look for your head. Look for your head while you're looking at everything else. And just notice that where you know your head is, the world appears. And take one last deep breath. And I appreciate everybody walking through that with me. The point of a meditation practice is really to start developing moments of true awareness, right? That are not, you're not distracted by anything else. And they don't last for very long, right? That's the point of the practice, to be able to hold that moment for longer and longer. It may only be for seconds at a time, and then to be able to go out into the rest of your life and still be able to call those moments, right? There's nothing, in fact, while you're walking down the street or doing anything else, driving your car, where you couldn't have the same type of meditation. So I love the joke, how do you know if someone's a vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you. I feel a little bit like that with meditation, but I swear that other than right here when I say, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity, I really don't bring this up a lot outside in the world. But it comes up, right, more and more with people. And I had a coworker who had said, you know, I tried meditation once and it doesn't work for me. And I mentioned that, in fact, I meditate every day. And he says, does it help? And at the time, it kind of stuck me, because does it? It helps, but that's not really the question, right? The point of meditation is to get these moments that you can return to over and over, and as a byproduct, sure, it helps, but that's not. You know, the reason is not to meditate so you can sleep better, or it'll help you physically. Although it does those things too, right? That's not really the point. And there's another great Zen story. There's a Zen master who goes in and his student is meditating, and he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm meditating to become enlightened." And then the Zen master picks up a brick and he starts rubbing this brick, and he's rubbing the brick, and the student says, "What are you doing?" "I'm polishing this brick to turn it into a mirror." The student says, "You can't turn a brick into a mirror by polishing it." He says, "You can't reach enlightenment by meditating." This is not the point. What I will say is that with regular meditation in practice, this is another way of loving God and seeing what's happening, right? You become familiar with the separation of the senses, of the feelings, of the thoughts in different streams, and then you can bring them back together in that single expanse in a different way. So when you are still and you watch the flow of experience, this is where I then suggest you have an opportunity to witness the unbelievable explosion of each individual fleeting moment, even if only for that one moment, before getting lost in thought again. This is the moment the Lord has made. This is the instance that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So the practice is an investigation that you conduct on yourself, right? You see that your mind is well different from that internal monologue, what it's always telling you that it is. And it's a great source of peace. You don't have to take my word for it. You can see it yourself. And then it also becomes an easier path to being kind. But we can pick that up another time. So if you can use these moments of peace where you can consider and understand your own beliefs and your own faith and your relationship with God, the Creator, Jesus the Christ, it's a perfect opportunity. But there's work to be done here, loving God here and now, well before any concern about what's next. So pay attention, for indeed the kingdom of God is within you. Amen.